6 months earlier, I pulled into the driveway of our new home on Maple Lane with Emma bouncing excitedly in the passenger seat. Willowbrook Estates looked like something from a magazine cover. Every lawn was perfectly manicured. Every mailbox painted the same approved shade of forest green. Every house positioned exactly 37 feet from the curb. "Look, Daddy, the houses all match." Emma pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass. At 10 years old, she still saw wonder in everything. That was exactly what I wanted to protect. As a single father working 2 jobs to make ends meet, I had saved for 3 years to afford the down payment on this house. The HOA fees seemed steep, but the community promised safety, stability, and the kind of childhood I never had. Emma deserved trees to climb, sidewalks to ride her bike on, and neighbors who would watch out for her when I worked late shifts at the hospital. Our first morning, I was unpacking boxes when I heard the sharp tap of heels on concrete. Through the window, I saw a woman in her 50s approaching our front door. She carried a clipboard and wore a bright smile that somehow felt cold. "Welcome to Willowbrook Estates," she announced when I opened the door. "I am Karen Mitchell, HOA board member and neighborhood liaison. I am here to help you understand our community standards." Karen was thin and severe, with graying hair pulled back so tightly it stretched her features. Her clothes were expensive but practical, chosen to project authority rather than warmth. She handed me a thick packet of papers. "These are your community guidelines," she explained, flipping through pages of regulations. "Trash cans must be exactly 18 inches from the curb. Lawn height cannot exceed 2¾ inches. Garden flowers must be from the approved species list on page 47. I nodded politely, thinking these rules seemed excessive but manageable. After all, maintaining property values benefited everyone. "Your mailbox is currently 2 inches too high," Karen continued, consulting her clipboard. "You have 72 hours to correct this violation, or you will receive a formal citation." Emma appeared at my elbow, holding her new box of sidewalk chalk. "Hi, I am Emma. We just moved here from the apartment complex." Karen looked down at Emma with an expression I could not quite read. Her smile never wavered, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "How lovely," she said in a voice that suggested otherwise. "I trust you will teach your daughter to respect our community standards as well. Children can be so disruptive to neighborhood harmony." That evening, Emma drew her first chalk masterpiece on our driveway. Flowers and butterflies covered the concrete in brilliant colors, with "Welcome Home" written in her careful 10-year-old handwriting. She spent 2 hours creating it, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Do you think the neighbors will like it?" she asked as we admired her work. "I think they will love it," I told her, ruffling her hair. "It shows them what kind of heart you have." The next morning, Karen stood in our driveway at 7 a.m., photographing Emma's chalk art with a digital camera. "Excuse me," I called out, still in my pajamas. "What are you doing?" "Documenting a violation," she replied without looking up. "Defacement of common area concrete is strictly prohibited under Section 12 of the Community Guidelines. That is our driveway, on our property." Karen finally looked at me, her expression patronizing. "Actually, the first 6 feet of every driveway is considered common area for snow removal purposes. Your daughter has vandalized community property." She handed me a formal citation printed on official letterhead. $150 fine for unauthorized marking of common surfaces. Emma watched from the front window, her face pressed against the glass. She had heard every word. That night she asked me why the mean lady did not like her flowers. I told her some people had forgotten how to see beauty in the world. But deep down, I was beginning to understand that Karen Mitchell was not just strict or unfriendly. She was dangerous. The citations began arriving weekly. Emma's bicycle, parked exactly where I had measured it to be within our property line, was somehow encroaching on pedestrian walkway space. Our garden hose, coiled neatly beside the house, violated exterior storage regulations. Even our doormat was the wrong shade of brown according to Karen's interpretation of the guidelines. Each violation came with Karen's signature and a photograph taken from multiple angles, as if she were documenting a crime scene. The fines ranged from $50 to $300, eating into our grocery budget and forcing me to pick up extra shifts at the hospital. She is targeting us, I told my neighbor Jim Peterson one Saturday morning as we both worked in our front yards. No one else gets this many citations. Jim glanced nervously toward Karen's house 3 doors down. Keep your voice down, man. She has ears everywhere. What do you mean? She drove out the Hendersons last year, found some obscure bylaw about fence heights and hit them with fines until they could not afford to stay. The Mortys lasted 6 months before Karen got them evicted for having their garbage cans out 15 minutes too early. I felt a chill despite the warm morning sun. How does she get away with it? HOA board meetings are a joke. Karen runs them like a dictator, and everyone is too scared to speak up. She has dirt on half the homeowners from her little inspections. Jim paused his weeding to look at me directly. My advice: keep your head down and do not give her ammunition. But keeping my head down became impossible when Karen began targeting Emma directly. I came home from work one Thursday to find my daughter in tears on the front steps. Her latest chalk creation, a rainbow stretching across our driveway, had been power washed away. Emma held a soggy piece of paper in her small hands. She said I was a vandal, Emma sobbed. She said if I keep making messes, we will have to move away. My hands shook as I read the citation. This time, Karen had written "Final Warning" in red ink across the top. The fine was $500. Did she say anything else to you, sweetheart? She said you are a bad daddy for not teaching me proper behavior. She said the neighborhood would be better without troublemakers like us. That night, I called the HOA board president, Robert Wells. He sounded tired when I explained the situation. Look, I understand your frustration, he said, but Karen knows the guidelines better than anyone. If she says there is a violation, she is harassing my daughter. She made a 10-year-old cry over sidewalk chalk. Have you tried talking to Karen directly? Maybe you can work something out. The next morning, I knocked on Karen's door. She answered wearing rubber gloves and holding a spray bottle of bleach, as if she had been disinfecting something. I need to speak with you about Emma, I began. The child who continues to deface common property, despite multiple warnings. She is drawing with chalk on our own driveway. She is not hurting anyone. Karen's smile was razor-thin. Property values in this neighborhood have remained stable because we maintain standards. When people start ignoring rules, decay spreads like a disease. She is a child expressing creativity. She is a child learning that actions have consequences. Perhaps if you were home more often instead of working multiple jobs, you could provide proper supervision. The insult hit like a physical blow. How dare you question my parenting? I question your commitment to this community. You moved here under false pretenses, claiming to want neighborhood harmony while allowing your daughter to run wild. Karen stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I have been researching your background. Single father, barely making ends meet, no family support system. You do not belong here. Are you threatening me? I am informing you that families who cannot afford to maintain community standards typically find themselves happier elsewhere. The choice is yours. That evening, Emma asked if we were going to have to move. Why would you think that, sweetheart? The mean lady told Mrs. Peterson that troublemaker families never last long in nice neighborhoods. My blood ran cold. Karen was not just targeting us with citations. She was spreading poison throughout the community, turning our neighbors against us before we even had a chance to build relationships. I began documenting everything. Every citation, every interaction, every cruel comment Karen made to Emma. I researched tenant rights and HOA law, looking for some way to fight back through proper channels. But deep down, I was beginning to understand what Jim Peterson had tried to warn me about. Karen Mitchell was not just a difficult neighbor or an overzealous board member. She was a predator who had found the perfect hunting ground, and she would not stop until she had destroyed everything Emma and I had worked to build. Everything changed the day Karen bought the Taser. I was leaving for work when she emerged from her house wearing what looked like a security guard uniform, complete with a black tactical belt. Clipped to that belt, clearly visible and obviously intentional, was a yellow and black device I recognized immediately from my job at the hospital emergency room. "Good morning, neighbor," she called out cheerfully, patting the Taser with her hand. "I have been appointed as our community safety coordinator. Recent incidents have made it clear that we need enhanced security measures." "What incidents?" "Vandalism, disrespect for authority, children running unsupervised through the streets." Her eyes found Emma, who was waiting for the school bus 20 feet away. "Some people seem to think rules do not apply to them." The school bus arrived, and Emma climbed aboard after giving me a worried glance. She had heard Karen's words, and I could see the fear in her 10-year-old eyes. That afternoon, I called the non-emergency police line to ask about HOA members carrying tasers. "Is she licensed security?" the officer asked. "I do not think so. She is just a neighbor on the homeowners association board." "Then she cannot carry it as a weapon. But if she has it for personal protection and is not threatening anyone directly, she is intimidating residents." "Has she threatened you specifically?" I could not prove that Karen's comments constituted direct threats. Everything she said was carefully worded to stay just within legal boundaries while maximizing psychological impact. Over the following weeks, Karen began conducting what she called neighborhood safety patrols. She walked the streets every evening, clipboard in one hand, Taser clearly visible on her belt. Whenever she encountered residents, she would engage them in conversations about recent security concerns and the need for vigilance against disruptive elements. The effect was immediate and devastating. Neighbors who had been friendly suddenly avoided eye contact. Children were called inside when Karen appeared. The community that had seemed so welcoming 6 months earlier now felt like a prison yard under the watch of a corrupt guard. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in late September. Emma was riding her scooter on the sidewalk in front of our house when Karen appeared for her evening patrol. "Young lady, stop right there." Emma braked so hard she nearly fell off her scooter. "What time is it?" Karen demanded. 6:15. Community quiet time begins at 6 p.m. No recreational vehicles are permitted on sidewalks after that hour." I watched from the front window as Emma's face crumpled with confusion. "But it is still light outside." "Rules are rules. Put that scooter away immediately, or I will have to cite your father for allowing unsupervised disruption of neighborhood peace." Emma began pushing her scooter toward our garage, tears streaming down her face. "And another thing," Karen called after her. "I noticed chalk residue on your driveway this morning. If I see any more vandalism, there will be serious consequences." That night, Emma crawled into my bed, shaking. "Daddy, why does she hate me so much?" I held my daughter close, feeling her small body tremble against mine. "She does not hate you, sweetheart. She is just sick. Some people get sick in their hearts instead of their bodies." "Will she hurt me?" The question pierced my soul because I could not honestly answer no. Karen's behavior was escalating. The taser was not just for show. She was building towards something, and I was terrified of what that might be. I started working from home whenever possible, reluctant to leave Emma alone. I installed security cameras around our property. I researched other neighborhoods where we might move, even though breaking our lease would destroy us financially. But running away felt like abandoning every other family Karen would target after us. Someone had to stand up to her. Someone had to draw a line. I just prayed that, when the moment came, I would be strong enough to protect my daughter from the monster who lived 3 doors down. I was running late from the hospital that Thursday afternoon when I received the call that changed everything. Emma's school was reporting that she had not been picked up from aftercare. My heart stopped as I realized I had forgotten about her early dismissal day. I broke every speed limit racing home, guilt and panic consuming me. Emma would have walked home alone, something I had taught her was safe in our neighborhood. Now I was not so sure. I turned onto Maple Lane to find my worst nightmare unfolding on our driveway. Karen stood over Emma, screaming at the top of her lungs, while my daughter cowered on the concrete beside her chalk art. Emma had drawn a simple flower garden in pastel colors, the kind of innocent creation that should bring joy to any normal person. But Karen was not normal. "This is vandalism," she shrieked, waving her clipboard like a weapon. "Destruction of community property. I will not tolerate this defiance." Emma tried to explain through her tears. "It is just flowers on our driveway. I wanted to surprise Daddy when he came home." "Do not lie to me, you little delinquent. This is common area concrete, and you have deliberately defaced it despite repeated warnings." I parked at the curb and ran toward them, but I was still 50 feet away when everything went wrong. "Please do not be angry," Emma sobbed. "I can wash it off." "You think saying sorry fixes everything. You think there are no consequences for your actions." Karen's voice had taken on a deranged quality I had never heard before. "It is time someone taught you proper respect." That was when she pulled out the taser. "No," Emma screamed, scrambling backward on the concrete. "Hold still, you little brat. This will teach you to follow rules." Time slowed to a crawl as I watched Karen aim the device at my daughter. The yellow and black plastic looked enormous in her hands, like some alien weapon designed for maximum pain. Emma's eyes went wide with terror as she realized what was happening. 50,000 volts should correct your attitude," Karen snarled. I was 30 feet away, too far, too slow. Karen pulled the trigger. The electrical discharge sounded like a thunderclap in the quiet suburban afternoon. Blue-white lightning arced through the air, striking Emma's center mass and dropping her to the concrete like a rag doll. My daughter began convulsing immediately. Her small body jerked and twisted as the electricity coursed through her nervous system. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, her back arching off the ground as her muscles contracted violently. "Emma, I bellowed, sprinting the final distance. Karen stood over my writhing child with a satisfied smile on her face. There, maybe now she will learn to respect authority. Emma's convulsions lasted an eternity. Her eyes rolled back in her head, showing only white. Foam began forming at the corners of her mouth. Her small hands clawed at the concrete, leaving bloody scratches on her fingertips. "Look what you made me do," Karen said calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. "If you had just taught her proper behavior, this would not have been necessary." Something inside me snapped. Not just anger or rage, but something deeper and more primal. Every civilized restraint, every social conditioning, every belief in justice and proper channels, and doing the right thing dissolved in the face of watching my child being tortured. I was no longer a man trying to navigate HOA politics or community relations. I was a parent watching evil destroy innocence, and every fiber of my being screamed for immediate, brutal justice. Karen turned to face me, still holding the smoking taser. She was no longer pretending to be concerned about community standards or property values. The mask had finally slipped, revealing the sadistic monster underneath. "Your daughter needed to learn respect," she said with cold satisfaction. "And apparently so do you." Emma's convulsions were beginning to subside, but she lay motionless on the concrete, barely breathing. Blood trickled from where she had bitten her tongue. Her small body looked broken against the colorful chalk flowers she had drawn to welcome me home. "You tased a child," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "I corrected a behavioral problem. If you had been a proper parent instead of working all the time, discipline would not have fallen to the community." Karen raised the taser toward me, confident in her power and authority. She had gotten away with psychological torture for months. She had driven families from their homes. She had made an entire neighborhood live in fear. But she had never faced a parent whose child was lying broken on the ground. "Stay back," she warned, finger on the trigger. "I am authorized to use this device to maintain community safety." I kept walking toward her, my hands steady despite the fury burning in my chest. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Karen's confidence cracked as I continued advancing despite her raised taser. She had expected me to cower like every other neighbor she had bullied into submission. Instead, she was facing something she had never encountered before, a parent with nothing left to lose. "I am warning you," she screamed, backing toward her own driveway. "Stay away from me or I will have you arrested for assault." Behind me, Emma was still lying motionless on the concrete. Every instinct screamed at me to rush to her side, but I could not take my eyes off the weapon in Karen's hands. She had already proven she would use it on a defenseless child. I could not risk giving her another target. "You electrocuted my daughter," I said, my voice carrying a calmness that scared even me. "I performed a necessary correction on a habitual rule violator. Your failure as a parent forced my hand." Karen's retreat was halted by her own mailbox. She was trapped between the metal post and my advancing figure, her taser shaking in her grip. "Assault with a deadly weapon," I continued, taking another step. "On a 10-year-old child. Do you understand what you have done?" She was vandalizing community property. I have every right to maintain order. "You have the right to torture children." Something shifted in Karen's expression. For the first time, I saw doubt creep into her eyes. The absolute certainty that had driven her campaign of terror was beginning to crack. It was not torture, it was discipline, necessary discipline. I lunged. Karen's finger tightened on the trigger, but she was too slow. My hand closed around her wrist, twisting hard until she cried out in pain. The taser fired harmlessly into the air, its electrical arc lighting up the space between us. We crashed to the ground together, Karen screaming curses while I fought to control the weapon. She was smaller than me but fought with the desperation of a cornered animal. Her fingernails raked across my face, drawing blood. "You are assaulting an HOA official," she shrieked. "This is a felony." I wrenched the taser out of her grip and rolled away, breathing hard. Karen scrambled to her feet, her perfect composure finally shattered. Her hair had come loose from its tight bun, hanging in wild strands around her face. Her clipboard lay forgotten in the grass. "Give me back my property," she demanded. "You have no right to disarm a community safety coordinator." I looked down at the taser in my hands, the same device that had sent 50,000 volts through my daughter's small body. The weapon Karen had used to torture an innocent child who had never hurt anyone. "Community safety," I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call electrocuting children?" She was breaking the rules. Someone had to teach her consequences. "You want to talk about consequences?" I grabbed Karen by the shoulders before she could react. She was lighter than I expected, her thin frame offering little resistance as I spun her around and forced her to her knees. "What are you doing? Let me go." "Teaching you about consequences." I pried her mouth open with my free hand, ignoring her screams and attempts to bite me. Her teeth clicked against my fingers as she thrashed, but I was stronger and driven by righteous fury. "This is what 50,000 volts feels like," I said, jamming the taser between her teeth. Karen's eyes went wide with terror as she realized what was about to happen. The same terror Emma had felt moments before. The same helplessness. The same desperate understanding that someone with power was about to hurt her badly. "MMMPH, MMMPH," she tried to scream around the plastic device. "My daughter is 10 years old," I said, my finger hovering over the trigger. "She draws flowers with chalk. She loves butterflies and fairy tales and believes the world is basically good. What kind of monster hurts a child like that?" Karen's whole body was shaking now. Tears ran down her cheeks as she stared up at me with pleading eyes. For the first time in our relationship, she was the one begging for mercy. "This is for Emma," I said. I pulled the trigger. The electrical current hit Karen with the force of a lightning strike. Her body went rigid, every muscle contracting at once as 50,000 volts coursed through her nervous system. The taser's prongs made contact with her tongue, sending the current directly through her brain. Karen's eyes rolled back, showing only white. Foam exploded from her mouth around the plastic device. Her body convulsed violently, her heels drumming against the ground as her nervous system overloaded. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. I held the trigger for 5 full seconds, the same duration Karen had used on Emma. Then I released it and stepped back, watching as the woman who had terrorized my daughter experienced the same agony she had inflicted. Karen collapsed face first into the grass, her body still twitching from residual electrical impulses. Blood trickled from her mouth where the current had burned her tongue and throat. Justice had been served. Karen lay motionless in her front yard, the smell of burned flesh and ozone thick in the evening air. Her body occasionally twitched from residual electrical impulses, a grotesque mirror of what she had done to Emma minutes earlier. Blood pooled beneath her face where the taser had burned her mouth and throat. I dropped the weapon and ran to my daughter. Emma was conscious but barely responsive, her small body still trembling from the electrical trauma. I gathered her in my arms, checking for burns or other injuries while whispering words of comfort I was not sure she could hear. "It is okay, baby. Daddy is here. You are safe now." Her eyes focused on me slowly, pupils dilated from shock. "Daddy, the mean lady, she hurt me." "I know, sweetheart. She will never hurt you again." The sound of opening doors echoed through the neighborhood as our confrontation finally drew attention. Jim Peterson emerged from his house first, followed by the Johnsons from across the street. More neighbors appeared, creating a growing circle around Karen's motionless form. "Dear God," whispered Mrs. Chen, covering her mouth in shock. "What happened?" I stood slowly, Emma still cradled in my arms. My voice was calm and clear as I addressed the gathering crowd. "Karen Mitchell used a taser to electrocute my 10-year-old daughter. She attacked a child who was drawing flowers with chalk on our own driveway." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the group, but I saw recognition in several faces. They had all lived in fear of Karen's escalating behavior. They had all wondered when her power trips would cross the line into violence. "So I gave her a taste of her own medicine," I continued. 50,000 volts just like she gave Emma." Jim Peterson knelt beside Karen's still form, checking for a pulse. "She is alive, but barely. Someone call 911. "Already done," called out Sarah Johnson, holding up her phone. "Ambulance and police are on the way." As we waited for emergency services, more neighbors shared their own stories of Karen's abuse. The Hendersons had been driven from their home by constant harassment. The Mortys had endured months of psychological warfare before finally moving away. Elderly Mr. Garcia had been afraid to leave his house after Karen threatened him with community safety measures. "She made my 8-year-old son cry last month," admitted Rebecca Foster. "Told him his sidewalk chalk drawings were gang symbols that would bring criminals to the neighborhood. She photographed my wife sunbathing in our backyard," added Tom Bradley. "Said she was documenting violations of public decency standards." The stories painted a picture of systematic abuse that had gone unchecked for years. Karen had used her position of authority to terrorize anyone who dared to challenge her vision of perfect suburban order. When the paramedics arrived, they immediately began treating both Emma and Karen. Emma's vital signs were stable, but they wanted to transport her to the hospital for observation. Karen required immediate surgery to repair the electrical burns in her mouth and throat. Detective Sarah Morris arrived with the second wave of emergency responders. She was a professional woman in her 40s who listened carefully as I explained what had happened. "So you admit to using the taser on Ms. Mitchell?" she asked. "Yes, after she used it to torture my daughter." "That is still assault with a deadly weapon." "It was defense of my child against an unprovoked attack." Detective Morris looked around at the gathered neighbors, many of whom were nodding in agreement with my statement. "Did anyone witness the initial incident?" she asked. 3 neighbors confirmed they had seen Karen attack Emma. Mrs. Chen had watched from her kitchen window. The Johnsons' teenage son had recorded part of the confrontation on his phone. Even Jim Peterson admitted he had seen Karen pull out the taser and fire it at a small child. "This is clearly a case of justifiable defense," declared Mr. Garcia, his voice shaking with emotion. "That woman has terrorized this neighborhood for years. Someone had to stop her." As the ambulance loaded both Emma and Karen for transport to the hospital, Detective Morris asked me to come to the station for formal questioning. "Am I under arrest?" I asked. "Not at this time, but there will be an investigation." I kissed Emma's forehead as the paramedics prepared to close the ambulance doors. I love you, baby. Everything is going to be okay now. For the first time in months, I believed those words were true. 3 weeks later, District Attorney Patricia Hendricks called me personally to deliver the news I had been hopping for. After reviewing all the evidence, including witness statements and the video footage, my office has decided not to pursue charges against you, she said. Ms. Mitchell's attack on your daughter was clearly unprovoked and constituted aggravated assault on a minor. Your response falls within the legal parameters of defense of others. The relief was overwhelming. I had spent sleepless nights wondering if protecting my daughter would cost me my freedom and leave her without a parent. What about Karen? I asked. Ms. Mitchell is facing multiple felony charges: assault with a deadly weapon on a minor, abuse of authority, and criminal menacing. Several other neighbors have come forward with additional complaints that are still under investigation. Karen had survived her injuries but would never speak normally again. The electrical burns had permanently damaged her throat and tongue. More importantly, her reign of terror over Willowbrook Estates had ended forever. The HOA board underwent complete restructuring within a month. Robert Wells resigned as president, admitting that he had enabled Karen's behavior out of cowardice. New leadership was elected from among residents who prioritized community building over rule enforcement. Emma recovered fully from her ordeal, both physically and emotionally. The other children in the neighborhood began joining her for sidewalk chalk sessions, creating a rainbow of artwork that stretched down multiple driveways. The new HOA board officially designated chalk art as community beautification and encouraged creative expression. "Look, Daddy," Emma said one evening as we admired the latest creations. "Everyone is making flowers now." The irony was not lost on me. Karen's attempt to crush childhood joy had ultimately inspired the entire neighborhood to embrace it. Other families began sharing their own stories of Karen's abuse, building a case for civil damages that would ensure she could never afford to terrorize anyone again. The community that had once cowered in fear now stood united against bullying and abuse. 6 months after that terrible day, I watched Emma teaching the new neighbor's daughter how to draw butterflies with chalk. They laughed together in the evening sunlight, their voices carrying the pure joy that Karen had tried so hard to destroy. Sometimes protecting the innocent requires taking justice into your own hands. Sometimes the systems designed to keep us safe fail so completely that ordinary people must become extraordinary defenders. I had moved to Willowbrook Estates seeking a safe place for my daughter to grow up. In the end, I had to fight to make it safe. But watching Emma's chalk butterflies take flight across our driveway, I knew every moment of that fight had been worth it. The neighborhood was finally at peace, and Emma was free to be the creative, joyful child she was meant to be.